So it's a quiet Monday, so we're going to jump into some Patreon listener questions. Once again, if you are interested in asking a question on the podcast, be sure to check out our Patreon in the description below. We have all kinds of different tiers, and you could ask a question on the podcast that we are going to flesh out. And here is one for today. We have from TheGreySkull, and he wants to know, I don't know if you've ever talked about this on the podcast. I've heard you mention it quickly on other segments with Jaws D. What is your story, and what do you do with packaging with Transformer toys? Wow. Yeah, I have talked about it very briefly, I believe, in the past on the podcast. But I mean, when it comes to packaging, I really feel that it's an individual measured against goal-oriented kind of thing. And I know that sounds crazy, but bear with me and I'll explain it. When it comes to packaging, it really depends on what you intend to do with it measured against your own personal situation. Now, way back in the day, my father, who is a toy collector himself, I remember I bought, I think it was one of my first like Marvel Spider-Man figures. And I remember my dad told me, like, hold on to the packaging. It might be worth something one day. Now, keep in mind, this was his frame of mind with his old 1950s and 1960s die-cast cars that, you know, were worth money with the boxes and with the packaging. And he's telling this to me in, I want to say, 1989, 1988, before the absolute, you know, glut of speculation boom that would happen where everyone's keeping packaging today and nothing's worth anything, with rare exceptions. But we'll get into that. So my father kind of like instilled that in me. And for the longest time, any toy line that I bought as a kid, whether it be X-Men, The Tick, Mega Man toys, Dragon Ball Z, it didn't matter. I kept the boxes, I kept the packaging, I kept everything. And we would just flatten boxes, or we would keep card backs. We'd obviously cut off the bubbles and throw those out. And literally, my dad would cut them off with an X-Acto blade. Imagine, so that way you don't rip the bubble. You just cut off the the bubble. And this is even before a day of recycling and stuff like that. It would just go in the garbage. And we would keep everything. I mean, still to this day, I mean, I have card backs of Reboot and Shadow Raiders and Street Sharks, and it just goes on and on and on. Ultraman, G.I. Joe's, Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, Mario figures. It just goes on and on and on. And we kept everything, but, you know, we sorted it properly and stuff. But then you ask yourself, well, what's the goal? You know, what's the end game? Why are you keeping the packaging? Is it for reference? You know, or is it for collectability because you want to be able to look back at the packaging? You have to understand this was before the internet, so it's not like, you know, you could easily just type up, you know, G1 card back or you know, Super Mario the movie card back and just get it. You know, you wanted to have it there as reference, but you know, there was a lot of different reasonings and goals back then. Is it you're holding on to it so that one day when you sell the product, you have the card back, and because you have the card back with the figure, it'll be worth more money? Today, it's a different frame of mind. And today, it's something that individuals have their own goals, and some people, they keep the card back because one day they might sell the product and they want to have it. Some people keep the card back because they really like the art, or they really like the bio on the back. And this is not just with Transformers, but anything in general. In my case, I have a very unique case, and that's why I if it's aimed towards me, how it works with me is, if it's product that is mainstream, you know, basic retail Transformer stuff that you could get online, and by online I mean like anything from Amazon or Walmart or Toys R Us, anything I could find in Walmart or anything like that, basic retail stuff. I you know, old habits die hard. I X-Acto blade off the bubble, recycle that, and then I keep the card back. But here's the thing, and here's the caveat. I keep the card back for personal collection if it's characters I really like or if there's something unique about it. But a majority of the card backs I keep and I put aside, and I keep them for when I come across those same figures loose in the secondary market. Give an example. A lot of movie toys, kept all the card backs, a lot of them. And same thing with Transformers Prime toys. As time passed, I came across a lot of those in the secondary market in doubles. People drop collections on me, and I end up with extras. I'm not selling my own personal figures, ones that I get in the secondary market. Animated is another example of that too. So now I end up with an extra Bumblebee, Transformers Prime, bulkhead, whatever. So I could sell it loose complete like that, or I can include the card back with it because I have it, including sometimes instructions. And you'd be surprised how much that actually increases the interest and value in a product. I sold a whole bunch of Transformer Prime product, and I noticed that when it had the card back, or when it had the box, or when it had the instructions, the interest in it, especially from foreign purchasers, whether it be Japan, China, or Europe, would increase significantly, because it seems like they wanted to have that kind of stuff because it added to the figure. And so that's what kind of was a driving force for me to keep a lot of packaging, was that as someone who also buys and resells in the hobby, it's something that I get free with my purchase anyways, and then I could either throw it in the recycling bin and return it to the earth, or keep it and potentially make a little extra coin with it. And how much is that little extra coin? Sometimes, you'd be surprised. I had a complete Armada Optimus Prime, and because I had the box and I just threw in the box with it, it went from being like a $40 item on eBay to a $60 to $70 item from the buyer. Now, granted, that also increased the shipping because of how much larger the box makes the shipping box, but it also, the dealers, the buyers pay the shipping anyways, but it also increased the value, something that I would have thrown out or recycled. Now, there is boxes that I keep regardless of this story that I'm telling right here. Masterpieces. I always keep the boxes. Keep them for personal collection, and that's the end of the day. Unique Japanese stuff, same story. Transformers Legends, stuff that has really nice box art. The box itself is almost part of the product in itself. It celebrates it and everything. And again, of course, any hot rod stuff, I love to keep the packaging and stuff like that. It's a really individual thing. I remember in Canada, and I posted this on Twitter once, how in Canada the packaging for all the Universe 2.0 stuff was, for the first two waves, were exactly the same. Like if you bought Prowl, Sunstreaker, Mega Octane, which was not Mega Octane, Tankor, which was Octane, G1 Octane, regardless of what character you bought, the box art on the front and the back was Sunstreaker. Didn't make a difference. You always got Sunstreaker. And I remember saying to myself, well, I guess that saves me the option of deciding if I'm keeping anything. So I just kept 2 or 3 of them, and I recycled the rest of them. And it's kind of the same thing. A lot of movie toys where I felt the card back would be useless, really small figures and stuff like that. I remember I recycled most of them, just returned it back to the earth, send that cardboard back. And it's just, it really depends. It really, really depends. I'm glad that I saved 99% of the Armada packaging, animated packaging, because that really increased the value of a lot of the product that I resold afterwards. Ending up with an extra Samurai Prowl and having the card back for it. And then end up selling a Samurai Prowl for $60 back then when animated toys were really hot. Really helped. It's definitely got back my $14.99 that I spent on it originally. That's for sure. And I mean, that Samurai Prowl would have been maybe $30, but having that card back made all the difference. And it maybe not be for you, and it's the same thing for me. I don't see too much value in packaging, but there is a lot of collectors that do see the value in packaging, in instructions, in tech spec cards and stuff like that. And I always say, when you're selling something, you're not selling something to please 100 buyers. You're selling something to only make one buyer happy because you only have the one product. So you just want to get that one guy anyhow. And yeah, it's kind of a complicated answer because everyone has their own goals. Again, my goal is I keep stuff for the potential down the line if I end up with the product a second time to then resell it. A lot of people go to my parts parties. You'll notice a lot of stuff that I have that's loose figures tend to have their card backs with it. That's a byproduct of that. And so they end up being able to get that packaging with it. What they do with it afterwards, that's their choice. If they want to recycle it afterwards, hey, it's better for the earth in my opinion. But at the end of the day, that's kind of what I do with packaging. I find like if it ain't characters that I'm super into, or if it ain't like masterpieces or really high-end product, like really, really high-end product, I don't keep the packaging. Obviously, anything that's, I guess we'll call it vintage at this point, say like I want to say like Beast Wars and down, maybe even Beast Machines. I'll count Beast Machines. 2000 and below. Anything that's 2000 and below, the year 2000 and below, so Beast Machines, Beast Wars, G2, G1, I'll keep the packaging for all of that, of course, without question. Not even for resale reasons. Like I love always tracking down G1 boxes and stuff like that still to this day. Those are just pieces of history, and sometimes I'm so tempted to even get some stuff. And I know I'll never do it because I think it's silly in the end, but to almost get some stuff graded, it's just it's crazy. But I love G1 box art. I love Beast Wars box art, and getting rid of those is almost a crying shame. And considering that we don't have like a beautiful book for Beast Wars box art, to get rid of some of those card backs with the beautiful art on them, some of the crazy art, even like Tigatron's box art, I would never want to. So it's just that today it's so easy to reference stuff, so it's pointless to keep tech spec cards for character references when you could just Google anything. It's even for just like, oh, I want to make sure that this was like this or this was like that. So at the end of the day, it really is an individual thing. But for me, it's more from a selling perspective that I keep stuff with minor things here and there because of just my own personal interest. But I hope that answers your question. I know that if you're someone who keeps it, the big problem is storage. It takes a lot of space. If I always say that when you keep packaging, it's like you're buying two toys because you open the toy and the toy on display takes space, and then the packaging that you're keeping is taking space too, especially if it's a boxed item. So that's always a kind of something you have to keep in mind, that you have to make sure you have to have space for it, or you're very smart where you flatten boxes, or you get rid of bubbles off of packaging. I know that in Japan, people just toss it. They just toss it. They can't be bothered because they don't got the space for it. And at the same time, if you go to any TFCon or BotCon, go to the dealer room, but then pass by any garbage can, and you're going to see nothing but packaging like crazy. And even like masterpiece packaging, like anything, people are just tossing it because they can't be bothered because they don't have the space in their luggage. So space is always an issue if you keep packaging. So sometimes it's just easier to take out the bot and, go from a huge deluxe card back with a huge bubble to like a small little figure that, could fit in your pocket practically when you're going through customs, just to give you an idea. But yeah, that's it in a nutshell. Thanks again for the question, TheGreySkull. Again, if you're interested in asking a Patreon listener question, be sure to check in the description below, and we could flesh out and have an interesting discussion about all the weird idiosyncrasies in our hobby.